Greetings everyone and welcome to this exciting new video tutorial on how to create your very own chatbot using OpenAI's ChatGPT API. This project is an excellent starting point for those who want to explore the ChatGPT API, which is 10 times more affordable than the text completion API. While working with the ChatGPT API, one challenge is keeping the communication channel open for OpenAI to track the conversation history. However, it's not as complicated as it may sound, and we will guide you through every step in this very video. Implementing a chatbot in your application can bring numerous benefits, such as improving customer service by providing 24/7 support, automating repetitive tasks and enhancing user engagement. And some cool use cases for other uses of chatbots include assisting with online ordering and payment processing, automating appointment scheduling and reminders, helping users troubleshoot common issues, providing language translation services for multilingual users, and such things as writing and editing blog posts. To supplement the video tutorial, we have also written an article that includes code snippets and additional resources. You can find the article on our blog at cosec.com or by clicking in the link in the upper right corner right now or in the video description. Additionally, we will make the completed code available on GitHub, allowing you to clone it and further develop your chatbot on your own. But now, enough of the introduction, let's get to write some code. Before we get started with writing some code, I want to quickly show you what we are actually going to build here. So this is the application we are going to build. It's not going to win any design awards. That's not the point of the video. The point of the video is to learn how to work with ChatGPT's API. So this is a very simple interface here. You can type a prompt in here. Let's say, "Hello Ava, how are you?" And you hit enter to submit the request. And then you see your prompt as user input. You can see that's what we wrote, and then we get a reply from ChatGPT that it's functioning well, doesn't have any emotions, thanks for asking. Okay, this is fine so far. To actually demonstrate that the chat history is working, I do a simple task here. So let's say, who was the president of America in 2018? I believe that was Donald Trump. The president was Donald Trump. Okay, and now to test if the chat history is actually working, we can ask a follow-up question. And who was the president before that? And Ava or ChatGPT should now pick up on that question. The president of America before Donald Trump was Barack Obama, who served as the 44th president of the United States of America from 2009 to 2017. So you can see it's keeping track of the conversation. And then we also have a button here that starts a new conversation if you want so. Then you just click the button, and if we type now, who was the president before that? Then Ava shouldn't have any idea what we are talking about. As an AI language model, I don't have contextual information. There you go. So it's a completely new context here. And I don't know why I call her or him or it Ava. I just came to my mind. I think I heard it from some movie. But this is the app we are going to build. Let's dive right in. So the first thing we do, we create a completely fresh Next.js project by typing npx create -next -app at latest space -- TypeScript, because we are going to use TypeScript in this project. And by the way, I'm using WSL2 on Windows 11. If you're interested in how to set it up, I'll leave a link in the video description below. There is also a WSL2 course available on stefanrose.com. All right, let's hit that. And let's name our project. So we name our project ChatGPT API. I think that's the correct name for that. Give me just 1 second to make sure I have it same as in the article. There we go. OpenAI. Other way, it's OpenAI -ChatGPT. That's how we're gonna call it. We want to use ESLint, so hit enter, and hit enter, and hit enter. We leave everything on default here. And I want to make sure to follow along exactly as in the written article, so that both tutorials interface 100% with each other. All right, So once we have that, should just take a couple of seconds, we cd into our newly created folder, and then I'm clearing the screen, and we are going to install a couple more dependencies. And for that, I make the screen a little bit larger for you guys. So we do, the next thing we do is we install OpenAI. So we do npm install OpenAI. It's simple as that. That should also just take a couple of seconds. Next up, we're going to install Tailwind CSS. So we do npm install -d Tailwind CSS. We also install post CSS and the Outtro prefixer. So we hit enter on that. And next up, we need to initiate the Tailwind CSS config file by running npx Tailwind CSS init -p, lowercase p that is. Now you can see that it created the correct config files for our project. And finally, we're going to npm install Daisy UI, which is a great UI library for Tailwind CSS so that we can quickly style our app without writing too much unnecessary CSS. Alrighty, now that we have that set up, we can go ahead and make our terminal down in the corner again, and then we are going to open VS Code right out of WSL2, and this opens our folder that we have just created right inside of VS Code. If you don't have that set up, that's the beauty of WSL2, but this also works on Mac OS. Okay, next up, we are going to set up Tailwind CSS and Daisy UI. That needs a couple of configurations. So we go into the Tailwind config.js file that resides in the root directory. And then we need to add a bunch of things to the content array here for Tailwind CSS to work properly. The first thing you need to add is quotes and then ./app // and then we need to define the file names. You can go ahead and just copy and paste that right out of the blog article. But as some of you guys requested, you want me to type code out instead of copy and pasting it. So that's what I'm going to do. The next thing we need to put in here is the pages folder, I believe. So we do ./pages // and then again JS, TS, JSX, TSX sounds about correct. So I hit tab to autocomplete. And the last thing we need is components. Let's see if it's automatically suggesting that correctly. No, there is one asterisk missing. Asterisk, I guess, which is right here before the dot. Now this looks correct to me, and we can go with that. And then we have another thing that we need to add, optional, that or if we are using the src folder, so it's just an additional line here in this array, we do ./src / and you don't need to worry about that at all. This is just the default setting for Tailwind CSS. You can copy and paste that from the article or even from the documentation of Next.js. Okay, then we have a comma on the end and we are done with the setup of Tailwind CSS. Next, we're going to add some code to our global CSS file. So go to styles, go to globals.css, delete everything that's in there. And now I'm really going to copy and paste that because I'm not wasting time writing CSS. So we are going to copy and paste that in. You can grab that from the article. Basically, we are just adding or removing actually a little bit of padding from the body. We also remove the margins. We make the width a 100%. We remove the text decoration from links, and we switch the box sizing to border box. And on top, we import the Tailwind CSS classes. Next up, we can go ahead and delete this home module.css file because we don't need it. Let's get rid of that. And I think that should be all for actually implementing. And there is one more thing we need to do. We need to add the plugin because we used Daisy UI. So we need to add in Daisy UI. Let me just check in which fashion that needs to be written. It's just require Daisy UI, require, and then in quotes, Daisy UI. Now we are done with CSS, Tailwind CSS and Daisy UI, and we can continue. Next up, we need to create an account for the OpenAI API. If you don't have one already, just head to platform.openai.com and sign up for an account. Now they have a free trial. I think you get like $16 or something like that to play around with for the course of a month or 2 weeks. I'm not sure anymore what the conditions were. Anyway, once you have signed up for that, you have to click on your name or your account name and then click on View API Keys. And there you can see all of your API keys that you have previously created and used. If you have any there, of course. If not, then go ahead and click on Create New Secret Key. And don't worry, I'm going to delete that key. Even you can see that now, but after the tutorial, it's getting deleted, so you can't actually use it. Make sure to don't share your API key with anyone. So just click on that. You can leave the window open maybe and just, if you want to have that open in the background, feel free to do so. I'm going to do that. So I'm going to close that. And the next thing we need to do is we need to create an environment file where we are going to store our API key. For that, we are going to create a new file inside of the root folder. And we call that .env.local. And we want to make sure that this file doesn't get pushed to GitHub. So we see if it's in there, and it's in there. It doesn't put any local env files up into GitHub if we push that. So inside of .env.local, we do OpenAI API key, and then we open some quotes, and then we paste in this API key from OpenAI and make sure to save that file. All right, now we have that set up, and the next thing we are going to do is we are actually going to create an API endpoint using Next.js. We will use this API endpoint to query our data from the OpenAI or ChatGPT API. Now we do that because it's the easiest way to do, in my opinion, and I'm sure there are some other ways to do it, but that's what I found is the easiest way, at least for me, to handle that. Now, if you go inside of the pages and then inside of the API folder, you can see there's already a file called hello.ts. We can just leave that alone or delete it. We create a new file here that we will call OpenAI chat.ts. Make sure you get the capitalization correct, and then we need to write a bunch of code. I'm going to explain the code to you in a second, but we need to import some types because we are working with TypeScript, so we need to import the next API request type as well as the next API response type, and that's automatically suggested to us from here. So I'm going to just autocomplete that with the help of Copilot. And next we are going to import the configuration and the OpenAI API from OpenAI. For that we write import curly braces configuration, comma, and we also need the OpenAI API option here, and then we do from OpenAI, and that should be good. Okay, so that's all the imports we need to do. Next, we need to create a new configuration. So we do const configuration equals new configuration. We open up some parentheses and some curlies, and in there we say API key is the process.env, which is leading to our local env file. And we do OpenAI API key as it's automatically suggesting here, and we're going to save that. So that sets the configuration object for OpenAI to send the request. Then we do const OpenAI equals new OpenAI API configuration. I think I have a typo here. Yeah, I have a capitalized P in here. Gets easily mistyped. You're working with different capitalization. Next up, we are going to export the async function, which is the function that it's going to ultimately send the request to the OpenAI API. So we need obviously a asynchronous function for that. So we do export default async function. We just call it handler. And in this handler, we need to write some TypeScript, which is setting the request to the next API request type and the response to the next API response type. That's what we need to do when we are working with TypeScript and Next.js. All right, next up, we can just go ahead and basically send the request or set it up so that we can send the request from our front end. If I'm moving too fast, I'm sorry. I will explain how all works together in the end when we have both the front end and the API set up. Then you can see how that all works together. But for now, let's just complete writing the endpoint, and then we test it out in a second. So to do that, we do const completion, and we equal that to await, and then we call OpenAI create chat completion, and we open that with parentheses and curlies, and then we say model, where we need to define the model, and this is where or which is an important part. The OpenAI API offers a bunch of different models here. For example, DaVinci was the text completion model, and ChatGPT is the GPT minus 3.5 minus turbo model that is used specifically for the ChatGPT API. Now we could define a prompt, of course, and just send that in there and send a single prompt for it or to test it, which we can do in a second. But what we actually want to do is we want to send over a bunch of messages, because we need to keep track of this conversation. So we need to always send back and forth on a whole array of objects to ChatGPT to be able to keep track of our conversation, of our ongoing conversation. So for that, we set that to request body messages, which we will define over in our index.html in a second. And finally, when something comes back, we want to send the response to status code 200 to have a successful response. And then we want to send back some JSON. So we open up, we say JSON, and then we open up some parentheses and then curlies. And then we say result colon completion dot data. So we have that all set up. We can save that for now, and we can move on to our index.tsx file next. We haven't actually run our app yet. We don't even know what it looks like. This all will make a lot more sense in just a second. So head over to index.tsx and just Control A and basically delete everything that's in there. Now we need to use a import here. We need to import React and as well as useRef, which we will use in a second, from React. And then we are going to define our home component. So we say export default function home. That's basically the same thing that was there before, just without all the demo text from Next.js. So we open up some curly braces, and then we do a return here, and we just say return a div, and that's what I'm going to copy from the article, because that makes it a lot easier and saves us some time as well. So we have a simple div here that should return an h1 with the large text of hi there, I am Ava. Let's try to run that. So we do npm run dev. I always like to have a terminal window open here next to me so I can see what's happening. Of course, you can also use the integrated terminal in VS Code, should you prefer that. Okay, we have that open. Let me quickly pull that over. And it's actually not showing an large h1, it's showing a small h1. Maybe we have a typo in here. Text 6XL, or we have messed something up in our Tailwind config. That's also possible. Or we haven't saved something. But that looks all good, basically. It should show up large. But it doesn't, because Copilot tricked us into believing he wrote the correct code, or it wrote the correct code. Quickly head back to tailwind.config.js. It forgot an asterisk. Is it called asterisk? I think it's called asterisk in English. Star thing next to the, or inside of the pages line here before the dot. And if you hit save, then it should work. Okay, it didn't have the pages folder correctly implemented. Okay, we are back on track. So we see that we have our application up and running, and now we can move along or move forward and start to implementing some chatbot logic here. So what we basically need is we need a input field where we can input some text. Then we need to send this input over to our API endpoint where ChatGPT will answer our question. And then we want to render every interaction in our React or our Next.js application right down below here somewhere. So we need an input field, we need to send that data, that means we need some event handlers, and we need some states that we use to store our data, and that's what we are going to write out now. So to do that, we first are going to initiate a bunch of states up here. So I'm just going to create those states, and I'm going to explain to you later what they do. So we do states, and they usually go on top of your function. So we do const, and we do value. We need a value. We need to grab a value from our input field. And then since we're using TypeScript, we use react.use state, and then we say it's a string value here. So that's TypeScript, and then we set it to an empty string for now. Then we need also to have a conversation state that keeps track of our conversation that we're having with the bot. So we say conversation, set conversation, conversation, and then we say equals, it's also react, use state, and then we say conversation, which is going to be our interface that we are going to create in a second, and we set that to an empty array. Now this seems maybe complicated because it's TypeScript, and if you haven't been working with TypeScript, it might seem a little bit weird, but we basically set a type interface here for this conversation array. So we say conversation, and then we open up curly braces, and then we just say role, string, and content is also a string. We will talk about those roles in just a second. So we have set up those two things, and then we need a last thing here, which is the input ref variable, which we will use for refreshing or resetting our conversation. Instead of just reloading the page, we're going to use ref, which is a better practice. So we do HTML input element, and we close that off, and we just set that to null. Okay, so now we have our states in check, we have our states set up. The next thing we need to do is we need to create our input form or our input field, and then we need to go ahead and write the logic for our handlers that are going to store our value. Okay, let's create the input field next, and to do that we're just going to put it below the prompt. So we say input, and we don't need to make that any particular type. What we do need is a placeholder name. We say type here, and then we also need a class name, not a constructor, a class name. And just to style that a little bit, we say widthful, max width is XS, and this is all Tailwind input. It's an input field, it's input bordered, and we say input secondary, so it looks a little bit better. There we go. And then of course we need to put a value to it, which at this moment is an empty string. Then we need on change handler, which is handling the input change, which we could do inline, but we do it in a separate function. So we just call that handle input, and we create that function up above the return statement. And then we also say on key down, which is when we press enter, we say handle key down, which is then updating everything that we need and sending the stuff over to our API endpoint. So the first thing we are going to do up here is we are going to create this handle input. So we do handle input, and we say react.use callback. So we do use a callback function, and then we open up parentheses, and then we do another parentheses down below, and we say event react.change event, and then this is TypeScript HTML input. It's a HTML input element, and then we open up a error function as Copilot correctly suggests here, and then we set the value of target value to this value. And then at the end we need to make a comma after those curly braces, and we need to set inside an empty array. The empty array that is passed as the second argument in the React.use callback function is the dependency array. Now this here. This array specifies the variables that the callback function depends on, and it is used by React to determine whether the function needs to be recreated or not. Now in this case, the handle input function does not depend on any variables outside of its scope, so passing an empty array as the dependency array tells React that this function does indeed not require recreation due to external or any external dependencies. Therefore, the handle input function is created only once and is memorized by React use callback for optimal performance, even if the component renders multiple times. So now every time we change anything in this input field, we type anything in, it will automatically get set to the state of value. And I can demonstrate that to you if I just comment that out real quick, which is causing the error here. And if you open up the console, we of course see the error still up top. But if we open the console here and make the console a ton bigger, and then we start typing anything here, you can see that it automatically gets updated on change. So this value gets updated as soon as we type anything inside of the text area here. But now we need to go ahead and create our actual handle key down function, which is the function, the crucial function responsible for basically initiating the chat with our chatbot. So I'm going to get rid of this console.log here, and I'm uncommenting this handle key down event again, and then we are going to create this function very quickly or very thoroughly. So we call const handle key down, that's how we call it, and it's a async function, and we need to set an event handler on that, which is react.keyboard event. And TypeScript can get a little bit annoying when it comes to these HTML input things. At least it's very annoying to write it, but it has its place. It definitely has its place. So we open up some curlies, and then we say if event.key is enter. So when we hit the enter key, and we want something else to happen, and we open up another curly braces here, and then we say const chat history. We just called it chat history, and we say it's a array, and then we have to use the spread operator to basically keep track of the history. This will make more sense once we are finished writing this function. Just now move along with me. So I say dot dot dot, which is the spread operator, and then comma, actually dot 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 conversation, which is our conversation state variable up here. And then we say role user, and we say content is value. I'm going to explain that to you. So conversation will be what keeps track of our conversation. This is the state that keeps track of our conversation. But we need a initial, we need to send a initial request, which is handled by this array. So this is the first request we will send, and this will then get chained on using the spread operator. So the spread operator in JavaScript, if you don't know about that, is a operator which allows the element of an iterable such as an array to be expanded into a new array or function call. In this case, the spread operator is used to concatenate the elements of the existing array with this array that we add to it, or with this object, so to say. Next up, we are going to create our response variable, which is the important part here. So we say const response equals await, and then we use a fetch request, and this fetch request goes, of course, to /API and to OpenAI chat. This is where we're going to send our fetch request, and we need to add a comma there after that and open some other curly braces. The method is indeed post. It's a post request. We need to set the headers to content type application JSON. It's also correct here. And then we need to send over the body, but instead of just sending over the chat history, we need to specify exactly the data format that we need to send over. So we say JSON.stringify, and we say messages colon, and if you remember, that's what we set up in the API. I'll show you that in a second. Chat history. We want to send over the entire chat history. Now we add a comma after that, and we hit save. Now we have that saved, but it will not work yet. We still need to add some more to that. So after that, we are going to do something with the stuff that comes back, with the data that comes back, because we want to obviously somehow display the data that comes back in the chat. So we do const data equals await response.json. And I'm walking you through this app again at the end to basically chain everything together, if you will. But let's first write it out. Then we do set value. We reset the value again, which is this here that we have sent. Of course, after every send request, we want to reset that value because we want to send a new prompt after that. And then we do set conversation, and we do an array. And then again, we use the spread operator, but this time we do chat history. And after that, after chat history, we need to address the role of our assistant, which is, so the user role is our role. That's what we need to define if we send user content or a user prompt over to OpenAI's ChatGPT API. And if we want to basically get the answer, that's the role of the assistant. But we also need to send this assistant role. So whatever comes back from the assistant, we need to send that back in our next request so that ChatGPT can understand the whole of our conversation. Showing you this, I'm going to show you a nice example in just a second when we write out this line. And then we do content, and the content is what comes back, of course. So it's data.result.choices, and it's 0 in here. It's a 0, and then it's .message.content. It gets a little bit long. I acknowledge that, but that's how we have to use it. Now, if we go over to the OpenAI documentation, and we go to chat, I'm going to show you exactly how that looks like. So if I pull that over here, and we can see what comes back here. If you find the chat thing, where is it? There we go. So this is the response. This is how the response looks like that's coming back from ChatGPT. And as you can see, it's the content that we are basically getting our data from. But what I wanted to show you is in this guide section here, when you go to chat completion, you can actually see an example of how that looks like. So you can see the system role up here is basically, you can set up or prime ChatGPT to be something specific. You can tell him to be an English translator. Now I didn't implement that in this application because I wanted to keep it as simple as possible. But you could go ahead and you could prime it. You could set a system, an initial system message that tells API or tells ChatGPT how to behave and what you want from him. We didn't do that. We started with the user, with our first query to ChatGPT is the user role. So we're directly sending a prompt and let it adjust automatically. But you can see that it goes back and forth here, and we always need to send this whole array of objects, of messages back and forth between ChatGPT and our application to work. And this is exactly why we need to work with the spread operator as we do here. So we need to always chain together all the replies and all the response data that's coming back. If that makes sense, I hope it does. We're gonna look at that in a big picture in just a second when we are finished with writing the application. Okay, so now we have that all done, and now we can actually go ahead and implement it into the front end, which should be quickly done. So to get going with that, we need to somehow render the data that both we sent and the data that comes back. Now to do that, we can use some JSX here, and we create a new div with the class of text area. And in there, we are going to do all of our logic. So we use JSX syntax, where we are going to use the map function to map out our items. So we do conversation.map. Then we need the item and as well as the index for TypeScript or React not to complain to us. And then we create an arrow function in here where we are going to map out all of our stuff. Now the first thing we need to do is we need to use a react.fragment, and we need to give that a key, the key of index, which is making it a little bit more clear and keeps everything indexed. Next up, we will just do a little br to get some space, and then we say item dot role equals equals equals, and we say assistant. And if that is true, if the role is assistant, then we want to render something specific. Now to do that, we say we create another div here, which is a chat bubble. So we say class chat end. This is the position of the chat, where the chat will be on the screen, and this is a Daisy UI utility class. Then we say another div, and we say class name. We say chat bubble. Oh, sorry, it's chat minus bubble, chat bubble secondary. And inside of that, we want to do a strong tag, and we call that, we give that a class also of badge, and we say badge primary. And in there, we say Ava. Okay, so this is our assistant talking, so that we can clearly identify that. Then we do another BR, which is a line break, and then we say item.content in the end. And once that is closed off, we go down here and we do a colon. We open up some other parentheses, and then we need to put the reply, or basically we need to put our prompt in there. So we say div, and that is again chat, and it's chat and chat minus start. And then in here we say div, another chat bubble, and in there we say chat minus bubble minus primary. And then we do the strong thing again. So we create, let's see what Copilot suggests here, badge primary. Yeah, that looks good. Or we can call that user. And then we do another BR. And then we do another item.content, and we hit save. And somewhere in here I made a syntax error, and how we can figure that out. Let's see if we can move that over here. That looks better. So there was a syntax error somewhere. The correct code is in the GitHub repository, obviously. Just double check it. I think, yeah, this was the error. There was wrong. We did curly braces in here. As you can see, if I go back, we did curly braces in here, but they are in fact parentheses. So this was the error. Okay, now we have it done. We have the app created. And the only thing that's missing is the button to refresh the conversation, which we're going to do in a second. That's very easy to do. Let's actually implement that right away. So we have it finished. We have the whole application finished, and then we're going to talk it through. To do that, to refresh, we don't just refresh the page. That's not good practice when using React. We are using useRef for that. So we do const handle refresh, and it's an arrow function. We say input ref.current, and if that's the case, then we say focus. We call the focus method, and then we do set value. We set it again to an empty string. And finally, we also do set conversation again to an empty array. Now, of course, we do need a button that goes along with that. Where we're going to add that. Let's put that. There's the input. There is our render. Okay, let's just put it here for now. Button. And in this button, we just do on change. On click, of course. It's on click, and we say handle. How did we call it? Handle refresh. Okay, so we call that, and we say new start, new conversation. Let's give that some styling as well, so the button is happy. We give it some margin on the top. Then we say it's a button primary, and it's a small button indicated by button XS. There's the button. Okay, now we still have a styling issue somewhere along the lines here. Probably some centering thing going on here. Let us quickly fix that before we move on. So we just add it here. We say the max width, that it doesn't stuck on the ends of our borders. We say max width is 2/3. Then we do an MX auto and justify center, item center. That should be fine. Let's see if that changed something. All right, one more refresh. And there we go. Now it's in the middle. So we can now type a prompt. We can send the prompt and we should get something back. Let's try it out right now. Type a prompt. Hi Ava. Hello, how may I assist you today? And there we go. Our application, our chatbot is already working. Now let's talk through the logic, how that all works, how that works together with the API, and actually how the data goes back and forth. Okay, so we created our OpenAI or OpenAI chat.ts, which is our endpoint. We defined the API key here. That's pretty self-explanatory. And then we move to actually doing a request to OpenAI's ChatGPT API, and then we wait for a result to come back. Now, how does this work? We are basically sending this request from our front end, from our Next.js application. We send the data that we put in here. So whatever we put in here, hello Ava, let's put it in here. That initially gets sent through the chat history variable that has the role of user and the content of value. So this is the first thing that gets sent over there, initiating the first question. Then we are waiting for a response, or actually we fetching a response. So we're sending a post request, we set the headers, and we send the body as messages, and we send over the chat history request or the chat history object. And then we are waiting for the response data. So const data, we wait for the response coming back from this API OpenAI chat endpoint. And then we set it to const data. Then we reset the value that we have typed in here, and we set the conversation, which is our chat stream if you want, to whatever was in chat history, so to our first request. And then we chain on the other object that is basically the response that's coming back from the request that we have sent. So we are chaining in the answer that comes back from ChatGPT. If we click on handle refresh, obviously this refreshes everything and ChatGPT loses its memory of the ongoing conversation. Now the way we render it, we are mapping through the array here, which gives us an ongoing conversation displayed or rendered inside of our application. Now, once we send this over to our API endpoint, it sends the request and it sends over the request.body.messages, and it gets back as a response the completion data. Now, how does it actually look like in data if we send that over? We know how it looks like in our chat, but we haven't looked at it inside of our API. So if we just go ahead and console log some things here, so we're going to console log the request body messages that we are sending over from the application, and then we want to also render the response, so the completion data. So we say console log, and in here we need to do completion data, and I believe it's content or choices. I think it's choices, to not get overwhelmed by too many lines of code. So then we send the request hello Ava, and we see nothing, in fact, because I haven't saved it. Let's refresh and do that again. So we say hello Ava, and you can see this gets sent over first. It's hello Ava with the user role, and then we get back a response, which is the messages or the message role assistant. Hello, how can I assist you today? There we go. And now if we continue doing that, I'm not sure yet. Tell me a joke. If we send that over, then that gets sent over here. But you can see this is our initial request, initial response. And then again, it sends the entire array of objects with our history over again to ChatGPT. So you can see this is again the first request, the first reply, the first response. And then it's sending the third one over. So our chat here that I'm not sure, tell me a joke. So that's also in there. And then the response is, again, sure thing. Why did the tomato turn red? Because it saw the salad dressing. Okay. Very funny. But it's just chaining things on top of each other. So if you do another one, that was boring. Tell me another joke. And then again, you can see there's our entire conversation history in here. So it always gets sent back and forth until we start this new conversation, and then it's completely deleted and we can have a fresh start. Now, admittedly, guys, this is a lot of information to wrap your head around. I hope I could make it somewhat easy to get to understand. I decided to use TypeScript because it's just a popular language and a lot of you want to learn it. So I thought, why not build it in TypeScript and challenge ourselves a little bit. Let me know what you think about that in the comments below. And definitely make sure to check out the written piece as well. If you need to go on a slower pace, I think that's a better approach for you if you need to have it a little bit slower. Otherwise, let me know what you think, guys. Is this useful? Do you want more tutorials on ChatGPT? There are obviously a million of different uses how you can implement it. You can write a simple React component that you can reuse throughout other applications as well. I created an example app where I did an automated blog using Next.js, and I used some authentication and stuff like this. So you can basically write a blog post by the press of a button, and you can have an ongoing conversation with ChatGPT to edit your text, to add more text, and so on and so forth. So it's really, really interesting. There are lots of ways on how to implement ChatGPT in all kinds of different projects. Let me know what you guys think about the tutorial. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the channel because there will be more coming in the near future. Very interesting stuff I'm working on, and I hope you are excited as I am to get into it. And I hope to see you back in the next one. Thanks for watching, guys. I appreciate it.